rundown of like what you're about?
Yeah, yeah. Hello, everyone. If we haven't met, my name is Ty Lewis, and I'm a consultant and a facilitator for Next Generation Consulting. Been with the team and Rebecca for coming up on a year and a half, which is just unbelievable. But originally from Stone Mountain, Georgia, so it's a town about 30 minutes east of Atlanta, Georgia, and then I moved up to the Quad City area, which is Moline, Rock Island, Davenport, Bettendorf, which is Illinois, Iowa, Illinois and Iowa region. And there I went to school there, high school, went to community college, 4-year college, got a finance degree, worked in banking. And then how me and Rebecca got in touch is I went to the United Way, and did some work for the United Way and just loved community development. And she did a workshop for one of our emerging leaders group, and it blew my mind. I mean, just thinking about the future, thinking about foresight, it just like, I was like, wow, like every leader needs this training. Like we all learn how to, learn about the history of our country, history of our family, but like we don't learn about foresight and how to look ahead. So it was just unbelievable when I saw it and she facilitated. I was just like, hey, like how can I keep this momentum going? Like how can I learn about this? And that turned into me helping her for about a year and a half now. So um
Yeah.
recently got married. I'm a newlywed. Moved to the Chicagoland with my wife, Kate. And we have a dog, Zuni, who you might hear in the background. She's whining. But she needs to, Kate might have to take her outside because she, right before the call, had ate some muffins that Kate had made
Mhm.
last night. So, anyways, I'm in the Chicagoland and newlywed, and yeah, love working with Rebecca and the team and doing community development work and consulting work. So it's been fun.
Awesome. Most people know me, Rebecca Ryan, economist and futurist, and I just want to welcome everybody from YP to board MVP. This is a conversation with Ty and me, and we're going to get into it. As you know, these never take longer than 30 minutes. If you don't have a lot of questions, we end them a little bit early. And we've gotten such nice feedback from people watching the recording. So let's get into it. Ty, tell us a quick story about your biggest light bulb moment on a board, because this whole thing is about how young professionals can join and make an impact on boards. So why don't you kick us off? Light bulb moment on
Yes.
a board.
Yes, I remember when I first got my invitation to be on my first board. It was back in 2021 while I was in college at the time. And I remember getting an invitation, just so like excited because it was just like I didn't know any of my friends that were on boards. I didn't really know how it worked, but it was just like, hey, you get to serve and help your community. I'm like, I'm for it. So I remember the first board kind of training that we went to. And we went to this country club and we got our board packet and board
Ooh,
binder. And I was just like,
fancy.
whoa, like this is a lot. Like, and I have to go back, like, think of it like you're in college and you're just learning how like college and the world works. So just getting this whole board binder with all the rules, responsibilities, how the board works, how the company works. It was just like, whoa, that's a lot. But I feel like the light bulb moment for me was after a few meetings in the board, it was really like, oh my gosh, this is how a board works. Because I thought I had this idea of like, okay, we're coming here, we're making decisions, we're like moving money around, we're like firing and hiring people. But like the light bulb moment was when I finally, like, somebody sat me down. I was like, here's how it goes. We want your opinion. Somebody sat me down, one of my mentors, is like, hey, like, we need you talking in this board meeting. And it was just kind of like, oh, wow, like I have a valuable opinion. And from then on, like I just valued just like, especially young professionals' point of view, their perspective. So started speaking up. But it all came because somebody sat me down and was just like, hey, like we value your opinion. You're on this board for a reason. Um, and I got to me asking questions and just learning how the board works. And it's like, okay, let's get after it now. So that was my light bulb moment.
Yeah, and I think back to when I was 25 and I was starting to serve on boards, probably closer to like 28, like when I started my business and people wanted an entrepreneur on their board, they wanted somebody who thought a little bit differently and was younger. My big light bulb moment was I thought all these older people on this board were going to like reach out to me, and none of them did. And I had to do the reaching out. I had to find people on the board who I felt comfortable with, who I could invite to coffee. And I wish someone had told me, you, as the new person, are responsible for doing the outreach. older people are busier than I am. They have far more responsibility. So to think like the head of the bank was going to like say, "Hey, you want to go grab coffee?" I was just so ignorant or naive, I should say. I was just so naive. So that was a light bulb moment I had, 25 years ago. So, all right, let's get into it. Core dialogue. First question we're going to cover is, how do you actually get on the board as YP? So, Ty, what worked for you?
Yeah, you have to be proactive. And what I mean by that is I was posted on social media. I was going to community events. I was having coffee. I was talking about I wanted to give back. I wanted to volunteer. I was in the room. I showed up. But as that started to happen, and as boards started to like, okay, we need to start to diversify our board. We value young professionals and Gen Z. Like, let's try to get some more on our board. When they put an application out or put out, hey, like to our board, we want to look for some more people, because I was actively involved in the community, actively posting on social media, actively connecting with leaders in the community. They thought of me. So I tell young professionals, it's just like, they're not going to, like, some might come to you because of your experience, because of your influence, maybe your family history or whatever it is. But like a lot of people, you got to go after it. Like, you have to start posting about, like, I'm volunteering, I'm doing community work. You have to go to events in the community to show your face so that they know that you mean business and that you provide value to the community as a young professional. Even if you don't think that, I think you just have to be proactive. And that's how I got on a board. And I feel like some of my colleagues too, it's just like, oh man, like, went to this event, went to that event, saw the same people. My friend over here was on the board. They had a board seat open. They thought of me, but it all came because they're top of mind, because they're posting on social media, they're at events. So be proactive about going to events.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And I'm going to give like my old lady advice now, like as a board chair, as a person who's been a chair of a board, been on executive committees, et cetera. The things that we look for are people who take volunteer leadership roles. So when people step forward and say like, "Hey, we need a new website," I could help you guys with that, right? And then you get, even if you're not on the board, right? You're outside of the board, but somebody who proactively approaches the board and says, "I can help you solve a problem." And they do a great job with something that they're not getting paid to do, or they're maybe being paid far less to do. That is always very appealing to a board chair. And you should know as a YP that it's not just the board chair that you need to impress. There's often a nominating committee, not always, but sometimes there's a nominating committee. So as a YP, what I would say is, like, if you know staff of the board that you'd like to be on, or the executive director, or you look up and see who's on the board, reach out, ask somebody to go coffee, say, "I'm like, I care about the mission of this organization," or whatever the case is, and how could I be involved with, like, just, is there a committee I could start on? And the committees are often the places where we start looking for people who might have like potential to be a board member. So it's amazing what one yes can do to, like, yes, I can help with that. Yes, I can serve. And then you just keep showing up, doing a good job, being conscientious, being a nice person to be around, it can get you a long way. So, Ty, what do you say when people say, "But Rebecca, I don't know somebody on a board, or I don't know staff of a nonprofit. Like, I have a passion or I have an interest, but I don't have connections." What do you say to them?
Go get them.
Go get
I
them.
tell people, go get them. Like, what is the organization you care about? What is the industry or cause that you care about? And like, are you showing up? Like, are you going to volunteer? Are you like reposting your stuff on social media? Like, you have to be present. Like, I think there's so many people on social media now. Live events and in-person events are starting to come back up. There's always volunteer opportunities available, but you have to show up. Like, that's what I did. And it was just like, I didn't realize that, okay, me consistently showing up would have led to board opportunities, job opportunities, career opportunities, but it's about showing up and going after it. So always start with being proactive. If you want connections, go get them, right? Go
Yeah.
get them and start with one person, and that led to like another conversation. Oh, do you know so and so? Okay, let me introduce you. So it's just like one more. Just keep going, because you can't just stop with one or two. You got to keep going, and that's going to lead to more success, more connections, and then more opportunities for you.
Even when I was trying to grow my business, one of the pieces of advice I got from a mentor, she said, like, so like, so I saw that Wayne has joined the call. So Wayne and I worked together in the past. So if Wayne and I are talking about me maybe working for his business, maybe, maybe not, right? At the end of that call with Wayne, I can say, "Are there a couple other people that I might want to talk with because they might be interested in hiring me. And you could do the very same thing, with volunteer opportunities. So you meet one person or one person at the end of that coffee, say like, these are the things I'm really interested in doing. Are there any other people I should meet to talk about how I could make a contribution? People know people, and we're all just 1 degree of separate, 2, 3, 4 degrees of separation. Okay, Ty, let's shift gears. Second question: the first 90 days of being on a board. How do you make an impact without being annoying? Because you're still sort of in the first impressions phase in the first 90 days, and not all board members come to all board meetings. So even if you're going to every meeting, you might still be in the first impression stage with board members who've missed prior meetings. So what do you say? How do you make an impact without being annoying?
So, two things that come to mind. The first thing is listening to what is going on in that board meeting, how things work, and how do you listen? Ask questions. Right? So if something doesn't make sense, ask a question. Um, Listen in the board meeting. How do people approve things? What is going on? But the one thing that really helped me was meeting with the board chair, meeting with people on the board, and just asking questions. Right? Connecting with them, learning more about what their industry is or why they're on the board, and just sitting back, it's like, hey, like, how do decisions get made here? What is this board really about? How do things get approved? Like, what is our job? What is your job? Why are you still on the board? But really asking questions and then sitting back and listening. Because I think sometimes you assume how a board is or what your job is or what you're supposed to be doing, but you never asked a question. So now you're walking in and you're assuming, oh, let me just talk here. Like they're asking about young professionals or they're asking about my industry. I got something to say, but you never sat back and like, oh, like how do things get done? What's the purpose of the board? So I think the first 90 days, take some people out to coffee, email some people on the board, text them, message them, get in contact with them and just ask questions, sit back and listen. And I think once you sit back and listen, you can then figure out, okay, this is how the board works. Here's what they're looking for. Here's what maybe what they're lacking. And then as you get to more meetings, you start to figure out, oh, actually, hey, like I got a thought here. As someone new here, here's something I'm saying. And you'll be surprised how many people value that,
Yep.
right? Because they brought you in for a reason. They're looking for some new perspective. They're looking for some innovation, looking for some more energy. And I think
Yep.
especially as a young professional, you bring that, right? You bring a different perspective. So I think once you get a gauge of like how things work, you ask questions, you listen, there's gonna be opportunity for you to jump in and say, hey, here's a thought I have as somebody that's just joined.
Yep. Yep. I would say, and my perspective is like, so as a young I remember being in these rooms and being so intimidated when I was in my 20s, like with all the other people on these boards, and they all seemed like they had more important jobs and more important roles. And so I was probably too quiet in the early days. And so I would say, I think there are kind of a couple categories of things. I would say, do not speak up when it's a general question about like, what is this organization about? Or, those questions are important, but ask that to a board buddy or pull the staff aside afterwards and say, there were a few acronyms. This is classic, right? There are a few acronyms that were used that I felt self-conscious about asking in the meeting, right? But it would be helpful to know like what these were. So kind of get your column of like questions to ask a staff, and then your column of questions to ask in a meeting is, this is like, I think a little bit more nuanced, but when the board together is in a discussion, it's not a report, right? It's a discussion. They're trying to discuss or debate some things. That is a great time to raise your hand. And what I like to do when I was a young person is say, I know I'm new on the board, and this might be a dumb question, but and just with that, you don't have to say the dumb question part, but like just prefacing it with that, even if it's a naive question, just when the board is trying to discuss and debate, you need to get in there. You need to be in the discussion and in the debate. And if you're self-conscious about your question, just be honest. I feel self-conscious about asking this because I know I'm new on the board, but X, right? And as Ty said, you don't know. Sometimes they're going to be like, oh my God, that is a freaking phenomenal question. Because a good question might be something like, why are we doing it this way? Or what other approaches have we considered? Because sometimes boards just get in the blinder mindset of doing it the way they've always done it. So I've found that if you soften it a little bit with that, like, I'm new to the board, this might be a silly question, but that can be a good way to speak up. But if it's like a general question about how the organization runs that's not related to the board conversation about the discussion, put that on your list of questions to talk with a staff member or another board member about. All right, Ty, is there any advice you have on, okay, first 90 days, like eager beaver? You can easily turn into that person who is actually talking too much versus like, wow, we have this new person on the board and she never talks. Like, what do you think is the balance there?
Yeah, I think your first 90 days, like, you don't wanna be eager beaver, right? I think going back to our stuff about listening, like, you wanna listen, and I love like, ask that say it's a silly question. "Hey, this might be a silly comment, this might be a dumb co" I think saying that, like, really levels things because it's like, "Hey, like" 'cause then what most likely will happen is someone will say, "Hey, that's not a silly comment. That's not a
Mhm.
dumb comment. That's not a dumb question." So I think you have that, but you have to have the balance, right, of saying things, asking questions, listening, sitting back, understanding how things go. And I love that board buddy. Like, who's your board buddy? You have to have one because I think if you don't, then you start to like question yourself. Was I too
And you
eager?
shouldn't
Like,
assume and you shouldn't assume somebody's gonna find you a board buddy. Like, that was my big mistake. I thought, like, I would just get mentored because I showed up. Mm-mm. I had to identify who my people were.
yes,
So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I got something for you. When we
Yeah.
think about kind of switching gears a little bit to a young professional, right? For someone that's like board chair that has experience, one of the things I've noticed is there's always a meeting before the meeting.
Yeah.
What would you say to a young professional, knowing someone that's joining these boardrooms and having these meetings and trying to help out, but knowing that, man, like they know more than me, or like you just assume like, oh, like was this already talked about? Like, am I is something going on? What would you say to somebody that's questioning the meeting before the meeting? How does that work? What is that about?
And that is a real thing. The meeting before the meeting is a real thing. So, there are some, like, I'm the chair of a board right now where we always have the board packets out about a week before, and I will often do a call around or at least text every board member to say, do you anticipate any questions? And it's not because I'm trying to answer those questions in advance, but we usually have limited time. And I just want to make sure that I'm aware of what people are thinking about so that we're ready for it, right? And if I hear many board members in these call arounds say, I'll have the same concern, I will just put it out on the table right away during that part of the discussion to say, there are a couple of themes here that everyone's concerned about. Let's talk about these themes. So there is often a board meeting that happens before the board meeting. And I would also say, I'm going to come on the back end of this. This is something our colleague, Brian Derberry recently said, which is after a board meeting, if all the board members are standing in the parking lot talking, that means the board meeting didn't work
Mm,
because those conversations should be happening in the board room, not in the parking lot after the board meeting. And that is that to me is like a yellow flag for a board. The board room needs to be a safe place that people can talk about the real issues. And if it's not, you may have a dysfunctional board. So, does that answer your question, Ty?
yeah, and you hit on some
All
other
right.
stuff that I think is definitely like another conversation around like how do we build a great board so that we have these unique conversations, people are honest, right? Psychological
Hmm.
safety is there.
That's right.
We understand red teaming and what that is and how do we challenge in a healthy way. But that's another conversation for another day. But I think you bring up
Well,
a good point.
but, Ty, maybe the takeaway on this is I think we're breaking some new ground here with each other even, is I think some of the takeaway here is maybe when you're in the dating period before you agree to join a board, a good question for whomever is taking you to lunch to woo you into being on the board, accepting a board position might be, what's the level of psychological safety in the room? Like, do you guys talk about hard things? Do people disagree with each other? And is it done in a constructive way? Um, and don't get me wrong, there are some boards And I would love to know from you guys who are watching live or how many boards have you served on that have been rubber stamp boards where the staff just does everything and the board is just there to like listen to the book reports and go, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Versus how many of you have been on boards, and these are my favorite kind of boards to be on, where you are really trying to solve like future facing issues and like I don't know, Ty, from your perspective, like what would you say the breakdown is?
Yeah,
Really proactive, decision, discussion oriented boards versus rubber stamp boards. What have you seen?
say half and half. Like I think they're, let's just say you're on four. I think two of them you're gonna have that rubber stamp,
Yep.
and two are gonna be really action oriented, where we're actually, they're actually valuing your opinion and we're making decisions on, different things. So I would say about half and half.
All
What
right.
about you? What would you say?
Well, I don't serve on those rubber stamp boards anymore because to me, those boards are spelled BORED because I am bored on those boards. I want to be on a board where I can, really play a role. So I'm down to one board now. And it's even that sometimes feels like it's slow work. It can be very slow work. So let's come back to this theme of unwritten rules. I think the meeting before the meeting is like an unwritten rule that people need to know about. And the same thing if you're on a committee or a subcommittee or task force, you're going to have to meet to get ready for the board meeting. So there's always the in between meetings before the actual board meeting. Ty, what have you experienced as an unwritten rule that you didn't know about before board life that you think YPs should know now?
Yeah, yeah. How I talked about this earlier. How decisions are made.
Okay.
There's, like you said, that meeting before the meeting. There's an depending on the board,
Yep.
right? There's an executive committee meeting where you're actually voting on, okay, budget, what direction we go. They're actually meeting with staff members or whatever that means. So I realized that meeting before the meeting, there's an executive committee meeting. So I think
Yep.
you want to understand, okay, how are decisions made? Right. And understanding that unwritten rule of like, okay, like you come in here, you think this is how decisions are made, but really they're made over here. So really you're
Yep.
just here to, give your thoughts. They might have stuff for you to talk about, but I think you have to understand how decisions are made and how that board operates. Because there's, like you
Yep.
said, different boards of how they operate. You have advisory, you have action oriented. So I think you got to understand how the board works.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When we were prepping for this, do you want to go a little bit deeper on boards that are advisory versus boards that are action oriented? Because that's another really good distinction to make. Do you want to spell that out for YPs?
Yeah, yeah. So an advisory board is a board that they just advise, hey, here's what's going good. That staff member or somebody might, say, hey, here's what's going on at the staff level, at the organizational level. Here's what we need help with. And then it's your job to advise, right? So you're not necessarily making any actions or, doing things. It's more of like, hey, you're on this board, you care about the organization, but you're advising.
Yep.
Here's my
You're giving
opinion,
your
here's my
opinion. Yeah.
thoughts.
Yep.
Boom. And then there's action oriented ones, right? Where you're actually forming committees and doing volunteer events. You're
Yep.
helping with social media. You're helping with fundraising. So there's different ones where you're going to get put to work and you're going to
Yep.
actually get out in the field and, maybe that's like a volunteer event. I'm actually on my college alumni board and homecoming weekend's coming up and we got an action oriented board where we're like, hey, we need volunteers. We need to go out and recruit for some people to be there. So that's action oriented board. So you got to kind of know like, is it advisory? Is it action oriented? Is it just a general board? Kind of what is the board?
Right on. Okay, now it's your turn. For those of you who are on the call with us, if you have a question for Ty about how to be a kick-ass YP on a board, now is your moment. Ty, while we're waiting for the audience to keystroke in any questions that they have, how many boards are you on right now?
Yeah, I am on 4.
And
I'm on 4.
how much time would you say you spend in an average month doing board responsibilities?
A good month, a good month, I would say I'm spending 4 to 5 hours. And I
Okay.
think because of that, it's you got some things are happening on social media, right? So you're responding to people, you're doing some outreach. You have a volunteer event, right? So you may be spending an hour, 2 hours there. But I would say most months it's probably 1 or 2 hours, right? You
Okay.
have
Yep.
just reading through emails, making sure you're caught up with everything. You're, doing research on what's going on with the organization. Um, so yeah, that's what I would say.
Yep. Cool. Cool. So we haven't had any questions come in on the live stream yet. So I'm going to follow it up with another quick question for you, Ty, which is, um, you mentioned being on social media and responding to questions. I feel like, check me on this. One of the unwritten rules of being on a board is you will be asked to make a contribution to the board. So you will be asked to donate, and it can be $10. But most boards want to be able to report to big funders that 100% of their board members are contributors. So you have to expect to contribute. The other thing you should know is some boards have scorecards for board members. So at the end of every month, you're going to have an opportunity, or end of every year, excuse me, you will be told how many of the meetings you attended versus missed, what your level of contribution, in terms of just like emotional not financial, everything that's not financial, like are your contributions A level, B level, C level? And it may say, did you give or not give to the annual campaign? And I am a big proponent of those because I think we all want to do good jobs on boards, but some boards have people who are just paperweights. They've been on the board for forever. And their contributions might even be good, but they are saying the same things in 2025 that they were saying in 2015. And I find that these kinds of like scorecards for board members are very helpful, if you're willing to do them honestly. Sarah Smith has a call. Have you ever stepped down from a board, whether it wasn't what you were expecting, too much work, or just not aligned with your values? Ty, go ahead.
Yes, yes, yes. I
What were the
have.
conditions?
And yeah, so it just didn't align. Like I thought it was one thing and it wasn't. They went a different direction. They were doing different things. And I think when that happens, for me, you gotta have an honest conversation. One with yourself of like, am I on this board for the influence it has? Am I on this board because I care about the values and what they're doing in the community? So what's your why of joining the board and being there? And I think when that why changes and you're starting to see, oh, this is how they're doing things, then that's where it's like, I gotta have a conversation with the staff member or the board chair and just be honest, like, hey, like either this is got too much time, right? Too much time that I'm spending here and like I'm missing time from my work, my family. Um, the values are, not what I thought they were. And you just gotta be honest.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's the hard part is like, can you be honest to let them know, hey, this is just not what I thought? Or some people just say, I remember I was a board chair. I was leading a committee and it was just like, hey, time is just valuable. Like, got my family, just had a kid, I'm moving, I'm doing this. And she's like, I get it. Right. So then it was like, my job was like, hey, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your time. And, they're going to go find somebody else. So I think you just have to know your why. And once you know your why, I think having those tough conversations, just to be honest with whoever's in charge to let them know, hey, like, we got to move different directions.
All right, we're going to do rapid fire. We're each going to answer each of these final three questions. Question one, Ty, one thing to do before accepting a board seat.
Yes, talk to the board members there, ask them questions. How does the board work? What's going on the board? Why are you on the board? So you know really what's going on that board before you join.
And I would say demand clarity about how much time is required to be a good board member. And you can do that a variety of ways. You can just ask the executive director, or you can say, tell me who your best board member is, and ask that board member, how much time do you spend being on a board? Okay, second question. One red flag that means run away from this board.
Yes, turn over on the board. If there are been multiple people leaving, joining, like, and I'm not talking about just one-offs right here every 2, 3 months, 4 or 5 months. I'm talking about every month, every 2 months, you're seeing people leaving, people joining. It's like, you might want to figure out why, right? But that's a red flag to me if you're seeing lots of turnover on a board because it's like something's off if that's happening.
Yep. And I had an experience where the top staff person wanted to do something that I thought was illegal. And I was like, I don't want my name in the paper. Smell you later. Run, run, run. Okay. Final question, Ty, final minute. One resource every YP board member needs.
Yes, I want to get to Sarah's question too, because she put something down in the
Okay.
chat. But my blog, right? I wrote a blog,
Yep.
my first blog, and I talked about what I wish I would have knew. So download that blog. I'm going to put it in the put it in the chat real quick as well, just so you guys can have it.
Okay.
But red teaming. If you don't know what red teaming is, it's basically devil's advocate. And I think every YP person needs to understand how to challenge a plan, challenge a person in the right way, in a respectful way. And it takes practice because sometimes you're like, ooh, am I coming off too strong? Did I not get my point across? But that's where the practice of red teaming really plays into it. Is like, you got to get practice saying, hey, like, I want to challenge that thought you just said because I care about the organization, care about the community, care about what this board is doing. And I have a thought that might make things better. So I think understanding red teaming. What about you?
Um, I'd say you need a board buddy. I think you want to make a friend on a board, somebody that you can learn, you can learn from as a young professional who, is delighted to spend time with you. It makes a difference and it's going to help you for the rest of your life. So, have that board buddy. Thanks for adding that link. Sarah is asking about size of board. So, I'm going to start on this one. And Sarah, it is that boards come in many different flavors. So I know chambers of commerce who have pay to play boards. So they might have boards of 70 people, but those 70 people write $100,000 checks. So that is how the structure is. And then, we work with at city council level with, so those boards are like 5 to 7 people. And, people who have 5 city council members are much happier than those who have 7. In Madison, we have an insane number of older people. It's too many. So it's kind of like there's a diaspora of right sizes, but I would generally say, to Ty's point about, are you an advisory board or are you a working board? If you need your board members to actually roll up sleeves, having many hands make light work, so you might want a slightly larger board. If you've got events you're running every month, you're going to burn your board members out if you've got a really small board and you're expecting them to do all that work. So I think the size depends on the function. Ty, what about you?
Oh, you hit it right on the nail, Rebecca. All that plus, plus understand, like you said, why is this board going on? Like, what's the purpose of the board? Are you looking for, fundraising, right? For them to raise funds, for them to, like you said, write checks for the nonprofit or for the whatever the board is? Are you looking for, like I said, action oriented? But I think you got to understand what the purpose of the board is, and that
Mhm.
can then help you realize, okay, we need extra members because, like you said, we got events going we got programming, maybe that's committees, right? But I think you got to understand what the board is and what you want from your board. And I think that will determine how many people you have on that board.
Cool. All right. I'm going to have the last word and we're going to sign off. The one thing is, a couple things. Boards come in all different sizes and flavors. But if you want to make a difference in your community, joining a nonprofit board is a wonderful way to do it. It might take a little time to find the right board and the right fit for the time and the energy and the skills that you want to add to it, but it is worth it. It's great for the community, but as a young professional, it's also great for you. Being able to add that you've served on a board does a lot for your resume. So I know Ty and I strongly recommend going out and getting that experience, giving back to your community in this way. Ty, thank you. You did a wonderful job. Everybody, please read Ty's blog. It was fantastic. Follow us on Substack. Follow us on all the socials. We will see you again October 31st. There's been a change in plans. We took the 17th off, so we will be back with you on October 31st. Take care, everybody. Have a great week and a great weekend.